To recap the last session, one of the primary things a church should focus on is developing the quality and the quantity of the leaders. Focusing on developing a pipeline of leaders is difficult and it takes time, but it has the potential to change the church and your local community. Jesus decided to change the world through a small group of committed friends, so I'm pretty sure it'll work for your church too. I'm really tempted at this point to jump into how-to stuff, some practical stuff, but we've done too many things at a lot of our churches without taking the time to slow down and evaluate the why, which shapes the what, providing clarity for the appropriate how. So if the last discussion focused on the why, these next two discussions will hone in on the what makes a great leader before wrapping up with the how. Going back to the conversations the advisory team had about overhauling the ministry to adults at North Point, we realized that a thriving small group is hugely influenced by a healthy leader. The only problem was we weren't sure how to define that. What do we mean by a healthy leader? What does that look like? What differentiates my great leaders from my mediocre ones? And how can we intentionally develop them? This is a critically important step for you to wrestle with. You can't find and develop healthy leaders if you don't have a clear vision of what that looks like. What do you consider a healthy leader? Does it mean that they can exegete scripture better? Have a servant's heart? Are they hospitable? Are they great question askers? Do they hold people accountable well? Do they model vulnerability? Do they teach well? Which ones do you want? Which ones do you not want? Which ones are the most important to you? We need to wrestle with what a healthy leader is before we can discern how to develop a healthy leader. So let's jump in, and it's helpful at the beginning to differentiate the internal and the external dynamics of a healthy leader. The internal attributes and health of a person compared to the external practices and the actions that they exhibit with others. Said another way, are they inwardly sound and externally equipped? You might be hoping I'm gonna tell you all about the externally equipped part. Maybe give you a workbook of tools and best practices, 20% off code for a new book. Nope. Because whether those are actually helpful or not largely depends on the first factor, the inwardly sound part. Most of us have had unhealthy bosses who go to a manager training. It doesn't really solve the problem, does it? The internal dynamics of a leader are much harder to develop and discern. After all, it's internal. It can't be measured and taught like a tool. That's why discipleship, or learning to live and to love like Jesus, is a lifelong journey of growing in our experience of God's love, loving others and being loved by them, and gaining greater self-awareness and emotional intelligence. And while it's a lifelong journey, we can go through seasons of intentional discipleship to hone in and accelerate some of the growth process. Today, I want to propose two primary principles of leader development that can serve as a foundation for your leader development initiatives. First, the foundation of a healthy leader is found in his or her theology and their identity, in how they see God and how they see themselves. And second, leadership is better caught than taught. We can only transfer what we've experienced. So let's jump into the first one, a leader's identity, how they see themselves, and their theology, how they see God. These are core. How we see God affects how we view ourselves, and how we view ourselves affects how we treat other people. So how we help leaders mature in their understanding of God and themselves could not be more important. So let's start with theology. How do they see God? How do we see God? Think about this. If you see God as a judge with a clipboard, keeping track of all the good stuff and the bad stuff you do, then that's what you're gonna portray to other people, and especially the people you're leading. You'll probably carry a low level of anxiety and need other people to do the right thing so that it looks good to God. People's messy issues might be hard for you to sit with because you kind of need them to shape up. On the other hand, if you see God as a benevolent grandfather, to borrow C.S. Lewis's analogy, who just wants us all to be happy and to do what feels good, then that's gonna affect how you see yourself, as well as how you lead others. you won't call them into the sacrificial, challenging, wondrous life of following Jesus. You probably won't be willing to have hard conversations in love because, well, at least they're happy. Do you see how our theology, our view of God, affects what kind of leader we are? This is at the heartbeat of healthy leaders who develop healthy disciples. Our view of God is also connected to our view of ourselves, our identity. This is the other side of the coin. Because of Jesus, what is my identity? Am I a sinner who through diligent and sincere effort will one day become a saint? Or am I a saint maturing into the righteousness of Christ that has been imparted to me? Our identity changes how we lead others. It affects our motives of leading a group, our shame, our willingness to be vulnerable. All this affects how we interact with others. We all believe some lies about our identity, and God will take a lifetime slowly pulling at those threads. But these lies affect how we see ourselves and how we see others, and that affects how we lead, how we interact with others. Now, many of our Sunday morning teaching has taught on these principles dozens of times. So why do so many men and women in our church feel stuck and have difficulty trusting them? That's because only trusted truth transforms. And trust is a relational word. Discipleship is always relational because in relational environments, we practice trusting these truths, not just with our head, but with our hearts. Trusting these truths with others. That is why a strong, relationally driven leader development intensive has the potential to accelerate spiritual growth, to help leaders move the 18 inches from their head to their heart, to trust the truths, process them in the safety of others, and then lead environments to help others do the same. That's the potential you have in the ministry to adults outside of the Sunday morning environment. Now, I could get fired up on this, but we got to keep going to principle number 2, which is that leadership is caught, not taught. I'll say it again, leadership is caught, not taught. You see this in kids. They have been taught a lot in their home, but most often it's what they pick up from watching their parents that has the most impact. This is why the actual person and character of a leader is so much more important than their techniques or giving them good teaching resources. The people in your church will pick up and start to model what the leaders show them. That's how a church culture forms. Here are a couple examples. One of the most important aspects of your adult ministry culture is found in the level of authenticity and vulnerability. And it's not fair of you to expect a leader to create an authentic, high-trust environment if they haven't experienced it themselves, because they don't know what it looks like or how to value it. You can't provide training about how the freedom of being fully known is worth the vulnerability, the risk, the investment. It has to be experienced first to understand the value of it. It has to be caught, not taught. Here's another example. One of the greatest discipleship tools we have is our ability to ask questions. Jesus was the ultimate example of a discipler of others, helping them form or transform into his likeness. And his go-to tool to help others, asking them questions. Now, you could put together the best PowerPoint or training in the world about the importance of active listening and the art of asking good, open-ended, reflective questions, but how much will that really move the needle? The trickle-down effects of your volunteers facilitating their groups differently with questions would be minimal. However, when you and I are in the presence of someone who listens differently and more intently, and you feel the focus, attention, and love of that person, you experience the power and the gift of a good listener. You don't have to be told it's important because you experience it. You begin to watch how you can lead in love through listening and asking good questions with greater intentionality because somebody did that for you. Because leadership is better caught than taught. Jesus knew this, and he modeled it with his disciples. We have the opportunity to develop environments to do the same. I want to wrap up this session by challenging you. The culture you are impacting is going to start with you. It's nice talking about these leadership principles, they're good, but these principles apply to you too. If you want your leaders to be healthy, vulnerable people, guess what? That starts with you. They look to you. Do you want them to be an authentic community? The kind where they can share their last 10% and truly be known? Where they're consistently being encouraged and challenged in relationships of trust? Have you experienced that? Are you experiencing that now? If you are, awesome. I'm so glad. And if you aren't, we have some resources and guidance, some of which are in these videos, but start really praying about where God is inviting you to experience for yourself what you hope your leaders will encounter. He seems to love those prayers. So, number one, theology and identity are foundational. And number two, leadership is caught, not taught. We hope you enjoy the supplemental resources and questions, and well done for continuing to lean into these difficult but important conversations.